We're getting to the point where I want to talk about Sicario, obviously, which was one of my favorite films from last year, which is made of several, sequences which are pure cinema for me and really brilliant. I heard you say that music is an abusive relationship to film. I was wondering. What is the nature of your relationship, of an editor relationship to a screenplay, to the script? Is it an open relationship? Is it complicated? Something on Facebook?
It's complicated. I was going to say it's complicated. Well, it's funny. The relationship with music is really important, and it's partly because I was a composer. I think that I'm very nervous about overuse of music, and it always, I always love, if it's possible, to give the opportunity for silence to take a place, and sometimes for sound effects to take the lead. We had a pact, which takes a brave director to say, let's not use any music for as long as possible, as long as we can finesse this film. And that meant sometimes it was even dialogue scenes, cutting them mute and just trying to kind of feel the rhythm of the images and get the cut in exactly the right place. And you also really quickly realize when music is your crutch and is keeping you going, when the story actually is sagging, and it makes you quite brutal with the material, which I think is very good. So we had this agreement, and it was such a magic relationship, that one, because we sent a sequence out to Johan, having worked on it quite hard and already finessed the film to a great degree. We sent out a sequence. There was a sequence with a helicopter going from these beautifully sort of lawns and swimming pools, and then you go across the border into the mess of Juarez. And at the time, all I had on it was this huge sound effect of a helicopter, and it just was the longest helicopter pass. And I just cut to that, and I was very brutal about it. And then we sent that to Johan, and we got this just mind-blowing piece of music came back, and we carried on working like that. So I think what happens is you end up with original music coming back. If you leave a tabula rasa, you leave an empty space for that person to inhabit without any, thoughts of your own infecting that discussion. It's a completely clean palette. And I think that paid off in that film.
One thing that fascinated me was this idea that at some point Denis and you decided that some scenes needed to be edited out. So the Kate character would become, in many ways, the POV character from the film. So the main protagonist.
The big change I think we made straight away is the film used to start with a sequence with Benicio del Toro. And he's in his white jacket, and he's the first shot looks like a man almost taking a pee in the sea. It was shot from behind, and it's very beautiful, and there's the waves lapping. And then you realize that he's holding somebody's head under the water and drowning them. And then he pulls the body out, and it's a cop, and he's interrogating him, torturing him. It was a really sick scene. It was such a strong, sick scene to start the film with. But the real danger was that it kind of, the place we needed to get to was of Kate's character being the main point of view of the film. And if you suddenly know more than the main character right from the outset, then it damages that. We loved the idea that, he just steps onto the plane and they react to each other, and they smell each other for the first time, and it sponsors in his mind a nightmare. And in hers, a whole series of questions that becomes the unraveling of this mystery. And then eventually, by the time we get to the tunnel sequence, it's a kind of, it's a smorgasbord of points of view, aerial, drone photography, green night vision cameras and heat detecting, it's every different type of point of view. So, but I think that's a great strength of Denis. That's one of Denis' really strong cards is determining whose point of view it is.
I heard you say that you thought your first cut made her too passive.
Yeah.
How you work things out to find the right balance afterwards?
Yeah, you have to listen to what people are telling you, and I really embrace that, and I think Denny does, and Steve. We all, sometimes you get notes and you hate them, but sometimes it's a question of not taking their solution, but taking their problem. Understanding what the problem is. I'll share a decision that exemplifies how to change things to make a difference. And it's such a small thing, but often these things are like pick up sticks. They're just little things that you do all the time. And there was a sequence in Sicario where Kate is back in her flat and she's looking at her laptop and she's forcing herself to look at the pictures of these atrocities in Juarez. And there was just two shots. There was a shot of her and there was a shot of the laptop. And the laptop had a kind of gradual move into the pictures. And in the edit, we changed the move so that instead of going to the pictures, it went to the forward button. And it sort of tells you that she's persistent, that she's pushing herself to see way beyond most people's endurance of horrible images, and she keeps pressing. So just one small little change in the way that you frame a shot and you change a track in post means you change the character and you express in a good way her passivity, but also her resolve.
We can't say a lot about what you're doing in Montreal right now. We all have our
I'd have
idea.
to kill you all, though. That's the only trouble.
We can't tell you, but we're going to have to kill you. Just one question about it. Will it be any good?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I'm pretty sure. Now I'll leave you to them.
Do your worst. Anybody got any questions for me?
Hi. I mean, obviously we see a lot of those director's cut after movies come out and everything. There's never such a thing as an editor's cut. But I was curious in terms of relationship with the director. Has it ever happened that there's been an unresolved disagreement about how a scene should be cut or how it should actually be made? You don't have to drop names, obviously you can.
Oh, God, yes. Yeah. But sometimes, actually, you need a couple of years away from a film, and then you look at it and you go, why was I making such fuss? What a drama queen, You go into a hotel and it's on and you end up watching it. And in fact, when we were preparing for this, I ended up watching 12 Years again. And it was such a great thing for me to watch that film and not think about the editing at all, but just to enjoy the material that I was given. It was really beautiful to watch. So you need a bit of time and distance sometimes. And sometimes I was right. I mean,
Thank you.
Could you describe a little bit the difference between different directors that you've worked with on the work method?
Sure. I mean, Steve is, I think I went into detail, he would tend to block out a scene in terms of the minimum amount of shots and is trying to kind of squeeze everything into this, shoehorn everything into that. And then Denny, for example, is much more, he's a planner, incredible planner. He and Roger, many of the key sequences were plotted out very, very carefully. And, in some cases, I just had to take the clapperboard off and join it to the next one. You'd have cancelled the lecture, wouldn't you, if you'd really known that? But yeah, what I'm trying to, he's a tremendous planner, and it's a kit of many, many parts, and you get a shot and you know exactly where it's going to go because it's got its moment. With Denny, I sent him cuts all the way during the shoot, and he'll send a note back saying, try this or try that. But he doesn't, he's much more like a shark moving forward, like you have to be. He knows that if there's a scene that he's worried about, he might ask for that to come a little quicker. And then, he's with me every day and we're chopping it and changing it and sometimes looking at different takes, sometimes, just the bigger broad strokes. I mean, they're not, directors they're more similar than separate, I think.
Thanks.
Hi, I got a question. When people start out as an editor, they don't have, as much say, and you have to earn your respect, with working with directors. How long did it take you to get that respect to where you are now?
I had a question from somebody, sent me an email and said, I'm stuck in indie films and I'm going to be here forever. And I said, well, how long have you been doing that? And he said, well, 3 years. I mean, I'd been around for 23 years before I cut hunger. So I'd done my time, apprenticeship, and took my time. And I think, it takes time. It took a long, long time for me to kind of find my confidence in doing things. And maybe my opinion isn't going to be everybody's, but it's like, I think I also am hired because I've got a strong opinion. How long does it take? It took me, Hunger was really the film where I felt I'd found my match in a filmmaker. And that really is the greatest thing you can do as an editor, is find the perfect director to work with.
About the distance you talked about, is there a moment in the process of editing that you say to yourself, I need some distance, and what are your tricks about this?
I had an editor, my first editor I worked with, who was this wonderful lady, Pam, who, her vintage is such, she whistled on Bridge Over the River Kwai. So she was that generation. And she always used to leave something unfinished at the end of the day, which I think is a really good tip. So you go as far as you can, but don't go all the way to finishing it. Leave it unresolved. And somehow, your brain works on it when you're cooking dinner or, watching TV later. So I'd say that's a thing for distance. And having a weekend is really good if you can, if you can manage it.
What's the first step to your process? Would it be to do a first assembly and as respectful to the shooting script as possible, or having seen all the dailies, do you start right off the bat with your own sort of take on the material?
The latter, really. I mean, you're in a very strange position because you're the second member of the audience. The cameraman is the first and you're the second in a way. So you're sort of listening to a set of imperatives that are coming from you from the intention of the filmmakers, and you're listening to your own well-learned, we've all seen tens of thousands of hours of drama, so we know what's expected, we know the tempo of things innately. So it's kind of obeying that, isn't it? It's trying to put yourself in between, but also trying to kind of, I'm always trying to find ways of not cutting, for example. So I'll be looking through the dailies and going, I can stay on her for all of that. And then I could cut, oh my God, it's going to get and I get excited about the possibilities of delaying the satisfaction of being on that other person in a conversation. Actually, conversations between two people are the things that I always judge other editors on, because I think it's the hardest thing. And I see people's skill with a conversation just between two shots way more than I do with kind of huge, battle scenes, which, often are multiple cameras, and that you'll get there eventually. But actually, in terms of, really conspicuous good taste, a conversation does it for me every time. So it's a good example.
Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much, Joe, for being here.